I spoke to my mum. She was like, well, I'm not sure that women can really fly aeroplanes in the Air Force because it was quite a new thing back then. But I decided I wanted to do it, give it a go. And actually I failed the pilot aptitude test the first time and I was gutted. I was like, that's it. Putting yourself out there and going, well, I'm happy to fail. I think when sometimes you've just got to go with your heart and you've just got to accept that sometimes that may not lead you in the right direction. But if you don't do it, I think you would regret it forever.
Helen Seymour. She made history as the first female Typhoon pilot in the RAF, serving as a fighter pilot for over 20 years.
I guess there's always that fear. Maybe fear isn't the right word, but you're always aware that you might be asked to do the unthinkable. I mean, you might be asked to shoot down an airliner. The chain of command has dictated that, is the best thing to do. And it's always in your mind because, you as a person will have to live with that for the rest of your life.
Today on PSI Love Me, we have Helen Seymour. She made history as the first female Typhoon pilot in the RAF, serving as a fighter pilot for over 20 years. Her extraordinary career spans frontline operations, Typhoon missions, and defending UK airspace. Helen has helped in the liberation of Libya, commanded multinational exercises worldwide, and recently served as an evaluator pilot on the Typhoon test squadron, where she led missile firings, weapons testing, and complex radar systems evaluation. She just left the RAF and she is stepping into an exciting new chapter, and we have her here today to share her interesting and incredible journey. Welcome, Helen. It's amazing to have you. Your career is so impressive, from making history as the world's first Typhoon pilot to your 2 decades of solid service, literally been breaking sound barriers.
Thanks ever so much for having me. Yeah, it all sounds very posh when you say it like that, but as with anyone that just does a job, for me it was just a job, and sometimes you have to look back and pinch yourself that actually it was pretty cool. But I'm actually really excited now to be having left. I left at the right time. It was time to hang up my boots, and I'm really excited for the future.
Amazing. So I have to ask right off the bat, when most people hear fighter pilot, they immediately think Top Gun, the aviators, the call signs, the adrenaline-fueled missions. How close to Hollywood does that reality actually get?
Oh, I don't want to let you down, but there's no hot guys in white pants in every room, unfortunately. But no, there are real similarities, actually. The bravado is correct. That is true. And obviously, as being little old Helen, the only female for about 5 years on Typhoon, I had to sort of deal with that and work with that. But you get used to it. It's a lot of fun. Actually, I would say that Top Gun is pretty close. The sort of the camaraderie aspect of it is definitely really true to real life. And also the sort of ups and downs that you see in it as well. It can be a bit of an emotional roller coaster. So I would say that that's pretty true to life as well. But there's definitely a lot of Hollywood. We don't play volleyball regularly on the beach. We're not as no, exactly. Yeah, we're not as buff as they are in Top Gun, but yeah, there are definitely similarities.
I think we all love it for the camaraderie and the relationships they all forge. And I think that's how you get through such stressful missions, having an incredible support group and colleagues. Like, I don't think there's any other workplace that you have to get on with your colleagues and you have to support each other and communicate well, right?
No, absolutely. And in the Air Force, certainly, the military as a whole, we have a real wingman culture. And, like you said, you could literally be going to war with the person on your wing. So that sort of ethos of having each other's back and constantly checking each other's six, whether it be on the ground or in the air, is really important, because at the end of the day, you are going to be saving each other's life and you're fighting for each other. So everyone at the coalface, as it were, on the front line, is definitely there for each other, which is just such a lovely thing to have and experience, I think, because sometimes I guess that's not always the case in maybe in other industries. I don't know, but we definitely had that wingman culture for sure.
Incredible. So you've had this, 20-year journey in quite a traditionally male-dominated field. What initially drew you to becoming a fighter pilot, and what was that moment when you realized this wasn't just a dream, but something that you could actually achieve?
Oh, crikey. Well, we all watched Top Gun. I'm not going to lie to you, that probably did have a bit of an influence, because it's not necessarily something that's traditionally advertised for women to do. And actually, I started to get interested in it in 1995, and actually a friend of mine, Jo Salter, was the first ever female fast jet pilot, and she only started flying in 1992. So it was a really new thing. But actually, I joined the Egg Nets when I was at school. A friend of mine sort of said, look, come on, you'll have a great laugh. We do loads of running around, you can get to fly for free. And I was like, that just sounded brilliant, because at school I was really sort of, outdoorsy and always doing sport and stuff. So I joined the Egg Nets and absolutely loved it. I just loved the culture, the excitement, the camaraderie, and I flew in a bulldog, which shows my age, and just loved it and realised that's it. And I spoke to my mum, and, she was like, well, I'm not sure that women can really fly aeroplanes in the Air Force, because, as I said, it was quite a new thing back then. But I decided I wanted to do it, give it a go. And actually, I failed the pilot aptitude test the first time, and I was gutted. I was like, that's it. It's not going to be for me. So I went to university to read medicine and thought, well, if I can't be a pilot in the Air Force, I'll be a doctor in the Air Force. And the University Air Squadron started me flying, which is a club for people that want to join the Air Force when they're reading their degrees. And that was it. I got the bug. I realised that it had been my passion all along. Said to my mum, look, sorry, mum, you're not going to have a daughter as a doctor anymore, which was her dream. I think she was a bit gutted. But that was the moment. And then because I'd started flying, my hand-eye coordination became better. I sort of realised what I needed to do to pass those tests. And I took them the second time and passed. And then that was the minute. That was it. I realised I'm just going to go for this. I'm all in. So I left university following my BSc rather than getting my full medical degree. And that was it. Just went for it.
What an amazing story. And I think the path to success isn't always linear, isn't it? Is it? You look at all these incredible people like you and entrepreneurs and high achievers who've got to where they have in life. And you always think they just ticked all the boxes immediately. But a lot of it is about awareness and growth and trying again when you don't succeed.
Absolutely. Yeah. And taking risks.
Yeah.
I think, putting yourself out there and going, well, I'm happy to fail. I think when sometimes you just got to go with your heart. And you've just got to accept that, sometimes that may not lead you in the right direction. But if you don't do it, I think you would regret it forever. I mean, there's that phrase, isn't it? Better to regret something you've done than something you haven't. So, I totally agree. I think sometimes you've just got to put yourself out there and take that risk, haven't you?
Yeah. And I think also when you have passion for something, you'll find a way. You can learn and the skills, but the passion and attitude, I look at a lot of people around me and people I've interviewed, and it's all about that passion and drive that gets them to where they are, whether they'll learn new skills, they'll try again, they don't give up. It's this mindset switch that gets them to where they are. So super interesting.
Yeah, because you will never put in that extra mile if you don't have that passion inside you for it, I think. So I think that sort of helped me over the years.
Yeah, 100%. So you served as a frontline pilot, basically defending UK airspace and NATO allies, right? And can you share what I read about, you have, can you share what quick reaction alert missions involved, and also what it feels like to be responsible for that level of national security?
Yes, so quick reaction alert is the defence of the UK airspace. So it may be against the worst case scenario, which would be a September the 11th sort of hijacked airliner scenario, or potentially against, the Russians maybe coming over to have a look at what's going on. So we would have jets on alert, ready to go, on standby, fully armed to go and intercept whatever threat might be coming into the UK airspace. So it's pretty intense. You do a short period because it's quite tiring, because you have to, because you are on such quick standby time, you have to essentially stay in your flying kit. You sleep in your flying kit because you could be called at a moment's notice to go. And so, but quite often you don't get called. So there's real periods of sort of lethargy, as it were. You're just literally sitting there with the anticipation of going, but you could have a whole shift where you don't do anything, or potentially on a day where there's been a threat discovered, potentially you could be in and out of the jet, so it's real highs and lows of adrenaline. But I guess there's always that fear. Maybe fear isn't the right word, but you're always aware that you might be asked to do the unthinkable. I mean, you might be asked to shoot down an airliner, or not asked to, told to, because that's, the chain of command has dictated that, is the best thing to do. And you are essentially at the end of that chain, and you're going to be the one that's doing that. And that's pretty sobering. And it's always in your mind because, you as a person will have to live with that for the rest of your life. And obviously the people's families on that airliner will direct their anger at you because you were, you may not have made the decision, but you were the one that was pulling the trigger. So that's pretty sobering. And I think that's always in your mind that, that's where the pressure comes from, I think, not necessarily from the act of doing it, if that makes sense. It's that sense of, oh my goodness, this is going to change my life forever.
And did you ever have to do that?
No, thank goodness. I mean, I've been scrambled quite a few times because obviously there is a sequence of events which would lead to that inevitable point. But obviously, if you can catch these situations early, then you can potentially avoid that. So there are times where we've been scrambled just to go and help airliners, potentially if they've had an electrical problem or they just need some help because they're airborne with an emergency, all the way through to, checking what is going on because you don't quite know why they've been distracted, why they're maybe not talking on the radios. So I've never had to pull a trigger, obviously, on a quick reaction alert because I think you'd have known about it in the newspapers. But I've been scrambled quite a few times and the adrenaline's pumping. I mean, even at 3:00 in the morning, I had one scramble and I came out, my navigator, this was back when I was flying Tornado, said, honestly, you look like the wild woman of Borneo. You came running out, your hair was everywhere, you were trying to get in your kit. It's 3 a.m. and I got airborne. And I then woke up and I remember thinking, oh, my goodness, I'm in an airplane. I better unplug the afterburners, the reheat, because we are already doing 300 miles an hour. And I didn't even realize I'd got out of bed. So sometimes, the adrenaline just takes over and it's pretty wild.
Yeah, I can imagine. And what techniques have you taught yourself or the RAF gave you frameworks with mindset and managing your emotions and mental health? Dealing with that level of adrenaline and pressure, how have you navigated that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the flying training system is epic. It's quite long and it's intense. And that might sound like a bad thing, but actually every single sortie that we flew was assessed. So we were absolutely normalised to pressure, to scrutiny. And I think that really helped with that. And we had this train hard, fight easy, which is just brilliant. So you do all of your blood, sweat and tears during training so that I remember the time that I was flying over the Libyan coastline for the first time on my first operational sortie, I was as cool as a cucumber because actually that appeared easy to the hundreds of sorties that I'd flown in training where actually they pushed me to my limit. The pressure had really been on. So I think that the training's been really good for that. And I think you just have to, I think you then also take that sort of training into your personal life as well. And you say, about the mental health aspects, it can be pretty hard at times. But you just have to, I quite liked just little things. Like I lived 45 minutes from base and it was nice that I had that time in the car on the way home to just put that to one side because I think it's really easy with a job like this where it becomes a lifestyle rather than a job and you can easily just take it home with you, but you have to force yourself to sort of put a firewall between the two because otherwise you just never stop thinking about it because it's everything, all of your friends do it. At that time, my partner was doing it as well. So, if you weren't disciplined with it, I think it could just permeate every single part of your life and you'd never get away, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And kind of shaking off the day, taking some breaths, getting, because you're quite in your masculine energy in work, you're assertive, you're projecting, and then just shaking that off and coming home and being you.
Yeah, that's it. And I'm not afraid to admit, I think there have been different Helens in the past. And I think that, people always say, oh, you have to find balance in your life. And I think one of the hardest things I found to do was to find balance between the Helens, if that makes sense, because there was definitely a work Helen and a home Helen. And sometimes the two would cross and sometimes the home Helen would be a little bit too forceful or, more sort of treading into the work Helen. And you just had to really balance the use, if that makes sense. And sometimes I didn't get it right all the time. It's really tricky.
None of us do, but it's just about being aware, isn't it?
That's it. Being aware and also being kind to yourself and just accepting that not all the times you will get it right, and no one does, but everyone's just trying to do their best, every single day.
Yeah, no, for sure. And throughout your career, I guess, especially early on, and, you'd failed that first test, succeeded the second time. Did you ever struggle with imposter syndrome? And how did you overcome any moments of self-doubt?
I mean, I think, if I'm honest with you, I still suffer from imposter syndrome. Coming on podcasts like these, I just think, God, why would anyone want to listen to me? And but I think that I think humility is a good thing. And I think that everyone needs to have a bit of humility, because I think it keeps you on your toes, it keeps you honest, and it keeps you, I think as a leader, you need a bit of vulnerability so that people can relate to you. And I think that humility does help with that. I think in the past, it has sort of probably tipped over into imposter syndrome. And definitely one example of that was I held the position of Stanaval, which was standards and evaluation. And essentially that's Ofsted for Typhoon, but just a bit less popular, because I had to fly with all the pilots and essentially assess them on whether they were up to the correct standard that we expected and that they were doing things the right way. And I was petrified of having that job, because at that time I was the only female Typhoon pilot. And I just couldn't get it into my head that the reason I'd been given that job was because I was a really experienced pilot. I was a really experienced instructor, but I could not see that. And I was petrified. The thought of flying with every single pilot from, the station commander, the highest sort of ranking pilot, down to the junior pilots. I was petrified because you can imagine as we spoke about with Top Gun, there's a lot of bravado, a lot of beating of chests, a lot of shouting about how good you are. And the thought of just flying with those guys just filled me with dread. But actually, it taught me a great lesson. When I flew with a lot of them, they were underconfident. They made a lot of mistakes. And it taught me that actually those that shout the loudest often have the least to say. And that sort of enabled me to maybe not necessarily get rid of imposter syndrome, but certainly sort of enabled me to have a mindset of, if I was just quietly confident in my own abilities, it didn't actually matter what anyone else did. I just had to concentrate on me and build my own wall of evidence, which, obviously the seniors could see because they'd given me that role, but maybe I just had to remind myself of. Sorry, went off on one there.
No, not at all. But it's true though, with imposter syndrome, it's always like, look at the facts. Why did they give me this role? It didn't come out of like a hat. So my name wasn't drawn out of a hat. Hey, let's pick Helen. You got to that position because of your incredible experience. And I think that's one thing that helps people get over imposter syndrome. And another is we're not born with confidence. Everyone thinks we're born confident, but it's that muscle that you have to keep squeezing. And I guess you just getting yourself out there. All right, step by step. And the more you got yourself out there, the more it got easier.
Yeah, definitely. I think at the start of my tour, a tour is sort of normally 3 years. And by the end of it, I did believe that I should be there. It's just a shame, I think, from my perspective, that it took me 3 years to understand that, because I think I would have really enjoyed it right at the start. But you're absolutely right. It is a muscle. And like I said, doing this now, this sort of thing is outside of my comfort zone. But I think if you can try and get out of your comfort zone as many times as you can, I think it just becomes easier. Because like you said, it's just a muscle that you need to exercise. So I couldn't agree more.
For sure. So it was a mission commander and standards evaluator. Is that right? That sounds like the first Top Gun. I can't remember the lady with the curly hair. Wasn't she like scoring?
Oh,
people?
Kelly McGillis. She was a civilian. You don't salute her. Not that I know all the words.
But you were saluted, were you?
I was saluted, yeah. I was an officer. I wasn't a civilian. I am now, but not then.
If you love PSI Love Me and want to dive in deeper, then join the Evolve Woman, my 8-week online coaching program, which will take you on a transformative journey of self-discovery, fulfillment, and to find the joy and love you so deserve. Check out my Instagram, Lynda Williams Coach, to find out more. But what, once you got into the role and once you got rid of most of your imposter syndrome and you started to enjoy it, what leadership principles kind of guided you through that? Like asserting yourself, essentially, through all this bravado, a very male-dominated workplace. How did you assert leadership?
Yeah, I think, I think it was predominantly male, but I think that we were lucky in that we had like I say, I use that phrase again, that wall of evidence. Every single person, whether male, female, didn't matter, had all gone through the same course. So actually we popped out the other end with exactly the same ability, experience, and we'd already proved ourselves. So I think that really helped when you got to the front line, when the bravado really did kick in. Actually, I was there on my merit, and I knew that as well as, everyone else. And actually, I would say the Air Force has been brilliant. I've never had any, hand on heart, never had any negative comments or whatever because I was a female, which is just fantastic. And I think that's really indicative of, I think when you're in a high pressure, high stakes environment, everyone at the coalface just needs to get the job done. And, the person next to you, they don't really care who you are as long as they also get the job done. And so I don't think there was potentially that much time for, negativity or competitiveness or anything like that. But I would say that in terms of leadership and actually asserting myself, I didn't really need to, because I think if you're just yourself, I mean, I think I'm quite a sort of bubbly, strong personality sometimes. I'm definitely nervous as well. I'm not, behind the scenes, I'm like that duck on the water, the legs are going, but I'm a cool and calm on the surface. But I would say I was confident at that point when I first got to the front line that I had made the mark. I had proved myself. So actually that kind of gave me that wall of evidence. But I think also, as I was an instructor, and I think as an instructor, sometimes you have to guide and lead the guys that you're teaching. And I always try to do that by example, in that, I was always quite humble. I was always, I would always show my, when we got to a debrief, I would always say, look, hey, I messed this up today. Look at this. This is what I did. And actually, this is what I could have done better. And I really felt that was a really good sort of leadership technique in terms of teaching people, because it then it kind of empowered them to then highlight their own mistakes. And actually, we all learned much quicker because of it. And I think a bit of humility is good in a leader. I think it makes you approachable as well. I mean, I guess I give my 2 pennies worth as well. I mean, people that know me will say she's not, I'm not a cowering violet. I will give as good as it gets when the banter starts, for sure.
And going back to, obviously, we talked about dealing with like the stress, the emotional and mental stress of it all. But you have to be hyper focused when you're out there. Like you can't afford to daydream. You can't just, let's just go off and make a cup of tea in the middle of this project. Like you are on, and you have to be just so intensely focused on the job. And I think, this speaks volumes to people who perhaps have to be focused on a job, but might be procrastinating, might be putting things off, might be like, I'll just do it in an hour's time. Like you just have to be on it. Like, is it just the sheer pressure that makes you hyper focused, or do you have any tips that just you put things in your mind on a different shelf to think about later? How does that all work in your head?
Yeah, I guess that comes back to the different Helens. I think the work Helen was very good that at the weather brief and then the start of we have a mission cycle. We plan, we brief, we fly, and then we debrief. And it's a very structured bubble around a flying event. And I think the work Helen was very good at sort of compartmentalizing anything else and going, right, I've got to drop everything. And the Air Force is very good with that. They're very good at not, once you're in the mission bubble, it's called, you are in that bubble and that's all that matters to you, and anything else, no one will distract you. And it kind of enables you to sort of get into that mindset. But it is tricky. I mean, I was a mission commander on an exercise, Red Flag. Red Flag is a big exercise in America. It's pretty cool. It's sort of legendary. It's based in Vegas. It'll push you to your limit. And I was the mission commander for that day. And it's a whole day's plan from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. And you have to be on your game for that whole time. And for anyone, that's tricky. And if at some points I did just go and sit down and think about something else, because whilst that's not good to do all the time, I think sometimes you have to just chill out for such a long period of time. You can't perform to your best for that amount of time. But it is it's a real issue. Certainly in the cockpit, we always said to the guys, look, the time that you're most vulnerable is when you're taxiing back in, because you've landed, you then switch off because all you've got to do is taxi back and shut down. And actually a lot of incidents and accidents happen in that sort of 5 minutes. When you've flown an amazing 8-hour sortie, you have an accident or an incident in the last 5 minutes. And it's just, I guess it's human nature. You sort of drop your pack and you're like, woof, that went okay, brilliant. And then something happens. And I think, you know, we had this sort of mantra of don't switch off until the wheels are stopped and the engines are shut down. Because I think it's just human nature to just want to finish, isn't it? And just move on to the next thing.
Yeah, I can totally imagine. And, you know, what you were saying, like a full day, you do need just a mind switch for half an hour, because sometimes you can see things in a different perspective. Like I know when I'm working, if I'm working a 12-hour day, designing new coaching modules, podcasting, whatever that is, I know if I go for a half an hour walk in the middle of the day and just refresh myself by the sea in nature, it just gives me a fresh level of thinking for the next half of the day. And it is important not to be so in it all the time, because sometimes we can miss things if we don't take ourselves out before and go back in again, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah. And sometimes my best sort of ideas would come after a bit of a break. Not, you know, maybe even actually, you know, if it's a day's planning, not necessarily with flying at the end of it, but maybe just going for a run, you know, just like you said, taking yourself out of it so that you can just step back and look at it with maybe a different Helen set of eyes, as it were, was sometimes really key.
Yeah. And there must have been instances when things weren't 100% in your personal life, whether it was with your partner or your kids, or you had worries, and then all of a sudden you have to devote, you know, 8 hours of your brain and your heart and your head to the job at hand. So how did you do that? Did you just put it on the shelf for 8 hours and then come back to it?
Yeah. I mean, it's true, isn't it? I mean, anyone that has sort of personal issues and then has to go to work, it's really tricky. I mean, sometimes, if I'm totally honest with you, I welcomed it. You know, if it was really like the kids had been a nightmare, it's like, oh, mummy's going to work and I can worry about you after school, you know. So in a way, it was sometimes a bit of escapism, if I'm honest. But no, it's really tricky. And actually, certainly in the Air Force, I think one of the hardest things is there's a bit of a phrase where they said the best thing about the Air Force is you work with your mates, and the worst thing about the Air Force is that you work with your mates. And like I said earlier on, sometimes the lines blur. And, you know, if you've had a bad day or you've confided in someone and then you end up in a work situation, it's like, oh, this is a bit awkward because I've told you about how, you know, bad something was or whatever. And yeah, it was, I think I always come back to that, just be kind to yourself and just accept that it can't always be cut and dry. I think, you know, you're also, no matter how high performing you are or whatever high stakes situation you're in, you're still human. And that's what makes you brilliant at what you're doing. And it gives you those, you know, different perspectives and different viewpoints, which mean that you get the best sort of plan and the best mission, as it were, done. And I think that those aspects also come with the other stuff that sometimes you're going to bring baggage to work. But I think that's also okay.
We're just human beings at the end of the day.
Exactly.
Trying to balance.
Exactly. If, you know, we're not robots and, you know, it's important to have a personal life. If you just had a sanitized work and a sanitized personal life, I'm not sure how that would work. But I think, you just have to be you have to be okay with not sometimes bringing your A game. And, you know, I think you've just got to accept that. It's frustrating sometimes because all of us want to be on our A game all the time, but it's just not physically possible, I don't think. Personally, maybe I'm just rubbish, but I think it's reality.
It's reality, and we're women as well. And we've also got, hormones to deal with, and that time of the month when we get brain fog and perimenopause and menopause. So, you know, we've got all these additional layers on top where we're just expected to still be at 100%, despite our bodies raging with hormones and feeling really under the weather. And so we've got that extra layer to deal with as well.
But to be honest with you, I mean, I had quite a few funny conversations. They weren't the sort of conversations that you would expect on Top Gun, but in the crew room, you know, the guys had just the same issues. I mean, literally the same fears, the same issues, the same worries. We'd talk about cookbooks, we'd talk about diets because everyone wanted to be healthier or more ripped. You know, it seemed like actually everyone just had the same concerns. And I think we maybe just hit ourselves harder because we feel like it's because we're a female and we're having to perform and we feel like we need to do better. But actually, my experience is that the guys were exactly the same.
Exactly. And it's nice that they opened up and were vulnerable to you about their worries as well.
Yeah, and I think that comes from that sort of humility, that sort of opening up. I think it just breeds a really nice sense of a safe sort of environment that people do feel like they can come to you and speak to you, and I think that's really important in a team.
Agree. And going back to your personal life, obviously you have quite a rigid work life. How did you make time for family, for a relationship indeed? Was it easier because you knew you were on in these hours and there was no wiggle room? Because quite often women and men, we go to work, there's a bit of wiggle room when we can speak to our partners, have lunch with them, leave work early. If you're an entrepreneur, you can switch your days around. But in your job, it's like these set hours, you're on or you're off, and that is it. Was that a good thing or a bad thing when you're trying to balance your personal and professional life?
I think it was really tricky. I think actually it wasn't sort of rigid on and off. I think if anything, it was more on all the time. As I said, for the 24 years I was in, I had my partner was also in the military for a lot of that. And yeah, I think he got it, obviously, because we both got it. And I have massive respect for people in the military that have non-military partners, because how they sort of deal with it, how they don't blame the other partner for time away, etc., I think is incredible. But it's really tricky. And I think, again, you don't always get it right. I didn't get it right all the time. It's really important to have an understanding partner. But I also think sometimes you do have to be a bit selfish. And I know that sounds awful, but for instance, I have a daughter now. I had her at 37. Now, I would have liked to have her a little bit earlier, but we went through IVF and it took a while. But actually, I don't regret having her that late at all, because actually I think I'm a better mum now because I don't have any resentment, because I don't feel like I've missed out on any of my own life, if that makes sense. And I know probably a lot of people will be raising an eyebrow going, wow, what a cow. But I wanted to be a pilot. I wanted to have my career. I wanted to have my cake and eat it, basically. So I'm really pleased that I had her a bit later, and I was a little bit more selfish in that, because I do think that I do feel like I'm a better mum because I'm more understanding. I'm a bit older. I've had my time. I don't feel like I have now. I feel like I can afford her all the time she needs now, because I've kind of got my own selfish work out of my system, if that makes sense. So, yeah, it's not easy, is it?
No, and I don't think it's selfish, because if your cup is full, whether that's scratching that itch of your career and your professional endeavors, whether it's filling your cup with self-care or exploring your own interests, if your cup's full, you can give more to your daughter, to your families, to your partner, if you're satisfied within yourself and your own life and your own accomplishments. But if you give yourself away to everyone, no boundaries, not filling your own cup up, then you don't actually have much to offer, because you're depleted of everything.
Absolutely. And I just feel like I've become a better person over the years. Like in my 20s, I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know who I was. 30s, I was getting there, but I think 30s were my best years. Now I'm in my 40s. I kind of feel like I know who I am. I'm really happy with me. I feel more confident, and I think that reflects on my relationship with her as well. And I think that that's nice, because I think maybe I would have projected a different sort of person on her if I'd had her earlier. I think now that she gets this really calm, maybe not calm all the time, but a much more sort of balanced mum. Now that I'm that bit older, I think it's good for her as well.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I'm not calm all the time. Who is?
None of us are. You just left the RAF after an amazing career, and that's, a huge transition. What led you to that decision?
So unfortunately, it was sort of forced upon me, because my neck became very sore after 20 odd years of high G, sitting in jets. It's not the best posture. Eventually my neck sort of gave up, and it started to become very painful to fly. So I eventually admitted that to the doctors, because as fast jet pilots we tend to sort of hide away from the doctors because they'll stop us flying, so we don't normally go to see them. But I realized that I had other things that I needed to do, like bounce on the bouncy castle with my daughter, pick her up, so I realized that actually sitting in the fast jet cockpit wasn't everything for me anymore. So they medically discharged me, unfortunately, because I wasn't able anymore to sit in a fast jet. So I think, if I'm honest, I probably would have done maybe 2 or 3 years, but I think I was almost ready for that decision anyway. So I think it's always nice to leave before you've gone past the point of maybe becoming bitter about it, because I have nothing but fond memories, which is just amazing. And I was very lucky to be offered a job with a fantastic company, and we provide training. So I use my experience now as a Typhoon pilot to train the next generation, which is fantastic. So we sort of organise and run the exercises. So that's amazing. And I pinch myself every day because I work with a great bunch of guys and it's just a lovely atmosphere. But what's really exciting is I felt like that was a bit busman's, in that I'd worked in the military for someone else all my career, and now I'm doing the same, which is great, but I wanted to do something sort of for myself and a bit more out of my comfort zone. So my friend Rosie and Rosie I used to fly with on Tornadoes. She's a navigator, so I would sit in the front seat, she'd sit in the back seat. We set up a company called On a Mission, and we're now sort of doing things like this. So talking about our experiences, we do keynotes, workshops, we talk about leadership, communication, and all the, and it's cool because as a pair, we're best mates. We are each other's wingman, but we also have, obviously, even though we were sat within a meter of each other, we have extremely different perspectives from the same sort of event. So it's really cool to explore that with, companies and what have you. And we have a blast. I mean, it's just brilliant to do it with her. And it's really lovely to have something that we've grown from nothing. We're a year old now, and it's just going from strength to strength. So I again, pinch myself because it's brilliant.
No, of course. And when you messaged me about the podcast, I was like, of course I want to have you on the podcast. You're so humble, but you have a wealth of experience from such a unique, different perspective to share with other people, to inspire them in their daily lives, whether it's a women in business or whether it's people who want to get into the RAF or women getting into a very male-dominated industry. You've got a wealth of insight and experience to share, and I think it's absolutely fascinating.
Great. And I mean, I feel very humble to be able to do it. What's really cool is it's not just from the female perspective, because I think a lot of our lessons and the tools that we were taught and our experiences are, for everyone, which is just fantastic. So we'll speak to anyone, but, we absolutely really love doing it. And yeah, it's just fantastic. Sorry, I messed it up there.
No, and I think you're lucky that, well, you're not lucky with an injury, but that it came right at the end of your career, because I know a few people that were getting very, very high up in sports, for instance. I know an ex-tennis player who was playing against Federer 20 years ago, and they got a terrible injury, and they fell into depression afterwards. And it can really hit you hard when you're flying high, and then, literally, pardon the pun, well, you are flying high, and then an injury comes in, and there's just nothing you can do about it. So, and
it's really hard. It's really hard. And I think if I'm honest with you, the biggest knock was to my ego when I left, because I wasn't a fighter pilot anymore. I realized that had been a real part of my identity, and I wasn't cool anymore. And I think that was the biggest change for me. And I also realized that I couldn't run for quite a while. I'm getting back into it now, but because of the injury, I wasn't able to really do any sports, and I couldn't, I used to snowboard, and I couldn't do that anymore. And I realized that actually I used to use exercise a lot for mental health and, to combat any sort of anxiety. And I wasn't able to do that either. So you combine those two things together. And just after I left was a pretty not dark period. I think that would be overdoing it, but I definitely felt the effects. And I think that's why it was great that I had this job to go to. And then Rosie and I had just been, started to talk about, oh, wow, we could maybe do this. So it was nice to have a light at the end of the tunnel, because at one point I was, it was a pretty big change after 24 years. Because like I said, it wasn't just a job, it was a life. It was your whole life.
Yeah, but you've segued and evolved beautifully into what you're doing now, and using all your experience and training and skills on that very intense 20 odd years and putting it to good use through, your you're speaking, and now you're training the next generation up. So it's the perfect segue for you.
Yeah, I mean, I feel so lucky to be able to do that, because I think all of that experience, if it had just gone to waste, I think that would have been a real shame. So it's really nice to, everyone joins the military to serve their country. And it's nice to be able to still use my experience to pull on that rope, and make the war fighters of the future as best as they can be. And I think that's a real privilege and honor to be able to do that.
Yeah, incredible. And looking back at your journey as we wrap up, what are 3 key insights that you'd like to share with our audience, which are mainly high achieving women who are looking to balance their ambition, balance their well-being, balance their fulfillment, balance their love life? What's like 3 key insights or takeaways you'd like to share?
Wow, we are busy people, aren't we? I think probably the first one is be kind to yourself. I think accept that you have limits, accept that you're human, and embrace them and work with them. I think that if you try and just be on your A game all of the time, you'll burn out, and it's okay to not be okay. So I think just accept that and be happy that you are you, and that everyone, comes to work doing the best that they can. And I think so you have to just give yourself a little bit of leeway sometimes. So I think that's my first one. My second one, I think probably would be don't be afraid of imposter syndrome, actually. I think embrace humility. I think it's a really good quality, and I think it keeps you on your toes and it keeps you honest and it makes you approachable. And I think that that's really lovely quality to have. I think, if it does stray into imposter syndrome, just every so often, just be okay with that, embrace it, and just go back to that wall of evidence that you've built for yourself and just remind yourself of all of the amazing things that you've done. And I think that then it will kind of come back to being a little bit of being humble rather than imposter syndrome. And what's the third one? Probably. So this is more of a mission thing. I think my biggest key to success when I was flying, but I think you can probably relate it to real life as well, is I'm a planner. Everyone knows I love a list. I absolutely love a list. And during mission planning, I would always make sure I'd thought about the what ifs. So, have a plan B and a plan C, because plan A never survives first contact with the enemy. And I kind of use that in life as well. And my other half goes crazy. He's like constantly making lists. We go on holiday and I have a list of what the kids need, what we need. And what if we get stuck at the airport? What if this? And he honestly takes the mick out of me all the time. But I'm okay with that, because I walk out of the door knowing that I've planned for the what ifs. So actually, I feel like even though I've spent 5 minutes of planning or constantly mulling over a list, actually, it makes my life so much easier. So a bit of a random one, but I would always think about the what ifs, because I think that actually, if you do that planning at 1G, i.e. on the ground, and you don't do it when you're 600 miles an hour with your hair on fire or running around with kids trying to get them in the car, I think that's one of my biggest keys to success for life. And you get to make a list, which is just one of my favourite things.
Oh, I love a plan B. Always have a plan B.
Oh my God, always. Plan C, plan D as well. And you will always, just breeze over that inevitable eventuality that is going to just catch you out, because it's there. You might as well plan for it.
And I think a lot of business people always have a plan B in their back pocket as well when they are going through it. High stakes risk in business. It's always good to have a plan B, a plan C in your back pocket, just in case. And I think humility is a wonderful trait to have, and it's a lovely, refreshing reminder today. And as well, be kind to yourself, show up and do your best. And that's what, as you said earlier, we're not robots. And if we can be kind, practice humility, and have a few plan B, C's and D's in our back pocket, we can get through life.
Absolutely. And drink wine.
Have a glass of wine and stay safe.
Have a glass of wine and celebrate yourself.
Exactly. Well, Helen, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on today. I've learned so much, and I can't wait to see what's next for you. That's it for today's episode of PSI Love Me. I hope you've learned some interesting nuggets to weave into your everyday life to feel a little lighter, brighter, and inspired. If you loved today's episode, be sure to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. It helps more high-achieving women like yourselves to find us. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram, Lynda Williams Coach, for more daily inspiration and updates.